Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrology segment. I'm going to be talking about transit Saturn making a square opposition or inconjunct aspect to one's natal Mercury. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Saturn, it can be about limitations, responsibilities, delays, sorrow, a despondency, fear, apprehension, inhibitions. Um, when you're talking about transit Saturn basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Mercury, now I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, what I'm saying is, of course, squares and oppositions are adverse aspects, they're negative aspects in astrology. Inconjuncts can be seen as neutral, they can have good and bad qualities in them. But because it has some bad, it can be, times can be negative. Inconjuncts can involve adjustments, transitions, and those things can cause some tension and exasperation. So when I say basically, collectively, I see it as an adverse aspect. But the thing about this is, now when I'm say it again, when transit Saturn is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Mercury, it can manifest in limitations, restrictions, responsibilities, delays, sorrow, despondency, fear, apprehension, inhibitions. These things might conflict perhaps with communication in general. Maybe you might be experiencing some kind of delay in communication. It could be just waiting on something on the internet, on an email. It could require more laborious work to actually speak at this time and to actually learn. You might feel like at this time, Saturn can be connected with laborious efforts. You might find that it may just be harder just to assimilate information at this time. Say if the natal Mercury is in Cancer, zodiac sign Cancer, it can be things connected with family, nostalgia, history, learning perhaps how to cook, more things that are associated with culinary work. It can be also looking at this transit again. This is about Mercury is about assimilating information. Again, it could be very hard, a little harder to do so at this time. It could be as well. Mercury is also connected with siblings, cousins, and neighbors. And if there's any activities that you may be involved with them, it could be delayed at this time, or maybe you feel there's some kind of limitation in these matters at this time, or you feel restricted, like you're not having enough time with them. In some cases, Saturn has a connection with time. It can be about timekeeping. It can be something too where maybe you're just looking at like the negative aspect or element of these people at this time, or it could also be just thinking in general maybe more negative and pessimistic more so than usual. It might be harder to think about positive things that are going on with you at this time. It might be where your mind might be more dominated by simply what is negative and adverse it could be in your life in general. Also too, looking at this, Mercury is about analysis, and it might be a time where you might be, it might be a little bit harder to analyze something. It might be, say, if your natal Mercury, is in Pisces, maybe it's some kind of deceptive or duplicitous sibling, cousin, or neighbor, and maybe you're having a harder time trying to understand why maybe this person is acting that way. It can be, could be like, say, if the natal Mercury is in Scorpio, and might be something with locksmithing, trying to analyze some kind of problem with that, or if you had a friend that died, for example, that could be another example. Because Mercury, Scorpio can be connected with death. It can be also too, or in some cases, you look at Mercury, it's connected with short journeys and local transportation. So naturally, during this transit, you may experience some obstructions or roadblocks or some delays At this time, if Capricorn is involved, it can be, maybe some kind, something just with road construction. Perhaps at this time, it might be something where it's causing some kind of obstruction or delay with you. It's also, anatomically speaking, Mercury is connected with the hands, the arms, the nerves, breathing, and lungs. And it may be a time too where there might be more, difficulty with this. At this time, it might be something where maybe it's harder, to do things more with your hands or your arms. Say if you're an older person and you have anything else in the chart that might confer or reaffirm this, it may be a time where you might be having those issues, the hands or the arms, or even with the nerves at this time. If the natal Mercury is in Aquarius, for example, it might be very erratic or sporadic breathing, and it might be causing more difficulty. And at this time as well, Saturn is about discipline, and of course Mercury is about thinking, so it might be a little bit harder to be more disciplined in your thought process at this time and planning. Sometimes I would think it may be better to wait until the transit ends if it's something that you're going to plan or premeditate, or something of any significance, something that could be potentially life-altering or changing. Maybe wait until the transit ends if you're able to do that. These transits do go on for a little bit, though, keep in mind. The thing about this is, too, it's also, it might be harder to think rationally at this time. It could be something that might be causing, some despondency, some sadness or sorrow, might be making it harder for you to think rationally at this time. Mercury is also connected with early education. So if there's somebody that was prominent in your early education, like a classmate, if you're trying to get in touch with him or her, it might be a little bit more difficult this time. Maybe you're looking at all the negative, from somebody you might have known from that time, or somebody that might have been in some kind of adversary or enemy at that time, and maybe you're still, looking at that person in the most negative light possible. Now, another way this transit may manifest, it could be where you might be having some apprehension or some kind of fear regarding short journeys. Say, for example, if the natal Mercury is in Aries, it could be maybe going into a volatile or a violent crime area, and you might not really be up to it. You might be having to drive over into that area, that neighborhood, and it might be something that you might be more fearful about than usual. It could also be at this time, it might be more of a laborious effort or challenge to, as I was stating before, reiterating, to assimilate your thoughts and articulate them perhaps as well. If the natal Mercury is in Aquarius, as an example, it could be maybe thoughts on astrology, the internet, computers, innovation, new technology, electronics, things that could be connected. Could be astronomy, anything that could be Aquarius related. Could also be a time too where it could be a father or an authority figure may be averse at this time to things that you're communicating, that you're talking about, or it might even be like that style or manner in which you're communicating. Say, for example, if the natal Mercury is in Leo, it could be being very boastful, or talking like dominating conversations, or talking like all about virtually everything, as an example. It could also be a time too where you have responsibilities might conflict with activities, perhaps with neighbors, with siblings, with cousins at this time, even perhaps people that may have been prominent in your early education, such as a classmate. Say, for example, if Saturn, is in Scorpio, it might be responsibility with taxes, insurance, a crisis, maybe coping with some kind of death, or it could be a figurative ending of something. It could be, something, Maybe it's something with, the occult, which includes astrology or locksmithing. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now at this time, keep in mind that Saturn is also connected with chronic illnesses. It could be very debilitating illnesses. It could be, if Saturn, for example, let's say, chronic illnesses may be difficult to maybe talk about or articulate at this time, and it might also adversely affect. It could be driving, local transportation, short journeys. Say if the transit Saturn is in Gemini, it could be some issue, carpal tunnel, the arms, the hands, the fingers. Um, it could be, something even with breathing at this time, or some kind of lung disorder that you may be going through, or just nerves. It could be nerves in general. At this time, keep in mind that Saturn is also anatomically, Saturn is connected with the knees, the bones, the joints, the hamstrings. So if there's any issues with them, it might cause driving, do matters with short journeys, mobility in general, to be a little bit more problematic, and there might be more difficulty in connection with that at this time, more so than usual. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.